Super Lucky Disaster Man. Chapter 26, The Insurance Company's Psychological Wound. Amuro-san seems to care quite a bit about Dazai-kun. Komaeda Nagito chuckled as if he was only making an offhand remark. But Amuro Toru couldn't afford to treat it as such a casual comment. His current identity was too complex, and even if he didn't plan to see Komaeda Nagito again in the future, it was best to come up with a reason to brush off the subject smoothly. So, Amuro Toru calmly offered a prepared response. Actually, besides being a folklorist, I'm also a detective. Gathering information is just a habit of mine. If you're uncomfortable talking about it, that's perfectly fine. Komaeda Nagito widened his eyes. A detective? Yes, registered with the police commission in Tokyo. In truth, he wasn't, but Amuro Toru could make it so with a few words. After all, it was all within the same system. The detective identity was just as useful as being a folklorist. A folklorist could appear in any remote and strange area, while a detective could ask any peculiar questions, and people would always understand. For example, right now, Komaeda Nagito felt that this profession did indeed explain why Amuro Toru had exhibited behavior that clashed with being a folklorist. It also perfectly matched the feeling Amuro Toru gave him. But a detective, huh? I did consider that, Komaeda Nagito said with a hint of regret. But I thought you might have an even more interesting profession. Anyway, a detective isn't bad at all. It's a pity I won't get to see Amuro-san solving a case. Amuro Toru's heart skipped a beat, and his assessment of Komaeda Nagito rose once again. To think that a junior high student could deduce this much from just a few clues. He had clearly been too careless. It seemed that, from now on, he'd need to wear his mask more carefully, even around elementary school students. At this moment, he could only carefully reinforce his fabricated identity. What a pity, but being a detective is such a boring profession. Honestly, folklore research is a bit more interesting. Komaeda Nagito pondered for a few seconds before suddenly smiling. If it's about being a detective, I'm more than happy to help, you know? There's really nothing I can't share. After all, I've only known Dazai-kun for a few days, and he definitely wouldn't tell me anything important. From a certain perspective, the most important information would probably be Dazai-osamu's ability. But that guy openly displayed it in front of Amuro Toru and Ayatsuji Yukito over the phone, having them take the transformed Komaeda Nagito to the port mafia to nullify it. It wasn't much different from openly displaying his ability. Komaeda Nagito briefly summarized his encounters with Dazai-osamu. Most of it matched the information Amuro Toru had already gathered, but there were still some details that hadn't surfaced in the reports. After all, many things only the people involved would know. For example, what exactly happened to him at the Port Mafia headquarters yesterday, something that the Japanese police couldn't investigate, and Amuro Toru wasn't aware of until Komaeda Nagito shared it now. Maintaining his determined poker face, Amuro Toru listened carefully, his expression subtly shifting. After a few moments of contemplation, he reached a conclusion. It seems like you've been caught up with quite a troublesome person. Being friends or anything like that, without a doubt, was clearly just an excuse. While Amuro Toru didn't know much about the inner workings of Dazai-osamu, since the special division and the police tend to hold back on sharing intelligence, but he, as a spy within the black organization, can still gather related intel. At times, Amuro Toru found himself frustrated with these poor practices of the government. Take the information on Dazai-osamu, for example. The intelligence provided by his own department was less detailed than what he could obtain from the black organization. But overall, no matter where the intelligence came from, Dazai-osamu shouldn't be like the way Komaeda Nagito described him. A person with a seemingly elementary school-level obsession with friendship. He must have another motive. Do you have any clues? Amuro Toru asked. Komaeda Nagito wholeheartedly agreed with Amuro Toru's viewpoint. I think he has another motive too, which is why I told him that if he wants to use me or something like that, he can just say it. I'm perfectly happy with that. There's no need to go through this friendship phase. Amuro Toru. Only now did Amuro Toru finally figure out the source of the unease he had been feeling around Komai de Nagito. Back when they were on the island, he hadn't really had any deep conversations with this kid, and later, when Komai de Nagito turned into a cat, he had even less of a sense of the boy's conversational style. It wasn't until today, when they met again, that he truly began to take a closer look at Komai de Nagito. Amuro Toru came to a headache-inducing conclusion. Komai de-kun seriously underestimates himself. From the moment they met, he had noticed that Komai de Nagito's focus and attention were all directed at him, and on the fact that his cooking was good, along with his friend. Up until now, he had assumed this was because the kid was curious about his identity. That's why he had been thinking about where he might have slipped up and how to correct it going forward. But then Komai de-kun suddenly blurted out something so shocking. So, not only was Komai de Nagito curious about him and his friend, but also about the dangerous Dazai Osamu from the Port Mafia, lumping them all together into some strange categorization. What was the key phrase here? Amuro Toru suddenly began to question the Japanese education system, unable to understand how a kid like this had developed such a warped worldview. But now wasn't the time to dwell on that, so he asked. Is it only Dazai Osamu you're concerned about? Before, you were assisting Ayatsuji Yukito-sensei, right? So, if Ayatsuji-sensei asked for your help? Komai de Nagito immediately replied without hesitation, of course, that's not a problem. No, what I mean is, if he asked you to sacrifice yourself. Komai de Nagito still answered firmly without pause, becoming a stepping stone for Ayatsuji-sensei would be my honor. Amuro Toru quietly took a deep breath, trying to suppress the rising turmoil inside him. In truth, he had never been the nurturing and caring type that he pretended to be in front of Komai de Nagito. Amuro Toru, or rather, Furuyare, had always been one of those fiercely independent and untamable people from a young age. It was only due to the nature of his missions that he created the false persona of Amuro Toru, inspired by the gentle personalities of his friends. If it weren't for his determination not to break character, he would really want to slam his hand on the table right now and shout at the person sitting across from him. Go. See. A. Therapist. But he held back. Amuro Toru rationally chose to continue asking, I noticed you also seem to value Nakahara Chuya quite a bit. If it were him asking. Komai de Nagito, already understanding what Amuro Toru wanted to know, interrupted, of course, I would agree. You, too, are the same, Amuro-san. If agreeing could help him uncover what Amuro-san was hiding, he would naturally comply. Komai de Nagito was genuinely intrigued by this clearly capable adult who seemed to be holding back so much. He truly wanted to understand what Amuro Toru's greatest abilities were. Amuro Toru took a deep breath, clasping his hands and resting them on his forehead to hide his expression. He understood now. The kid's standard was, people who are more capable than average. As for whether someone belonged to the darker side or the lighter side, Komai de Nagito didn't care at all. While the admiration for strength was common, to see it taken to such an extreme as with Komai de-kun, despite all his experience, this was a first for Amuro Toru. If he ever had the chance, he thought, it might be a good idea to recommend psychological evaluations starting from elementary school. He hoped that Komai de-kun was just an exception, or else Japan was in trouble. Still, as a source of intelligence gathering, this kind of personality was actually advantageous for Amuro Toru. So, despite being full of internal complaints, Amuro Toru wasn't going to ruin the moment by suggesting that Komai de Nagito see a therapist. So, next, Amuro Toru skillfully extracted some information from Komai de Nagito, things that Komai de Nagito himself didn't even consider to be intelligence. This left Amuro Toru feeling deeply reflective. If everyone were this cooperative, how much easier would his job be? By this time, it was already getting late, so Amuro Toru suggested to take Komai de Nagito home. Yokohama could be dangerous at night, and he wasn't comfortable with a minor walking alone in the evening. Speaking of which, it's the weekend today. Are you heading to school from Yokohama tomorrow? Amuro Toru asked. Oh, I've already taken time off, Komai de Nagito sighed. My teacher called to ask if I've had my health checkup. After hearing I was kidnapped again, they advised me to wait for the test results and take a couple of days to rest. I've been running around everywhere recently, so resting a bit might be good. Amuro Toru. Komai de Nagito's teacher didn't have it easy either. If it weren't for that whole cat transformation incident, Komai de Nagito could have gone straight back to Tokyo after his trip. The constant back and forth was one thing, but Amuro Toru suspected the teacher might also be worried about something else happening to Komai de Nagito on his way back, and honestly, that wasn't out of the question. Anyone who has some understanding of Komai de Nagito's life experiences would doubt whether probabilities even work the same way on him. Well, it's just a fleeting encounter anyway, and even if there were concerns, it's not really his place as an outsider to overthink it. Better to just get him home quickly and then focus on his own duties. Amuro Toru felt there was nothing wrong with his way of thinking. At least, until the end of this weekend, he was completely in agreement with that idea. The next day, Komai de Nagito welcomed the man with sunglasses from Tei Corporation, along with another individual who appeared to be his superior. The man with sunglasses introduced both parties. This is Komai de Nagito-san, and this is team leader Noda-jiro. We are immensely grateful, Komai-de-san, that you have made such a benevolent decision, said Noda-jiro, addressing the junior high school student with full politeness, exuding warmth and enthusiasm as if their purpose for the visit was simply to sell insurance. Komai de Nagito smiled slightly. Did you bring the contract? Please, let me take a look at it first. The man with sunglasses immediately pulled a document folder out of his bag, untied the string sealing it, and respectfully handed the contents over to Komai de Nagito. However, Komai de Nagito didn't hire a lawyer to review the contract, nor did he even take it in his hands. He simply observed the expressions of the two men before him and, after a moment of contemplation, said, "Since our cooperation has always been pleasant, and I trust you, I didn't feel the need to consult a lawyer. I hope the contract doesn't include any unnecessary additions. Otherwise, I'd be quite troubled." The team leader Noda-jiro flashed a professional smile and responded, Tei Corporation would never do something like that. However, before he could finish his sentence, Komai de Nagito furrowed his brows and continued as if he hadn't heard the response. Just a few days ago, I learned that someone from your side had an accident while investigating me a few years back. Moreover, out of the nearly 20 people who were involved in my last 3 kidnappings, only 3 survived. If something happens right after you leave my house, the police will come knocking again to ask me more questions. The man with sunglasses and team leader Noda-jiro. Wait, hold on. That's an alarming death rate, isn't it? And your concern is just about that? They had thought the trouble Komai de Nagito was referring to was just about contract loopholes. Does this kid realize what he's implying? Is this a warning, or is he just casually stating the facts? Noda-jiro's joy from the earlier success suddenly evaporated, and he started sweating as he recalled the infamous rumors that had once haunted their department. Previously, the unlucky ones either got demoted, imprisoned, or sent to the hospital. Noda-jiro prided himself on avoiding such fates. Getting demoted was out of the question, and he'd been careful enough to avoid prison. As for the hospital, well, a stay there could still be managed. But now, hearing Komai de Nagito speak, he realized that the danger level had escalated. If death was on the line, no amount of damage control would make a difference. He instinctively glanced at the man with sunglasses who had been negotiating with Komai de Nagito earlier. In the reflection of his subordinate's sunglasses, which acted like a mirror, Noda-jiro caught a glimpse of his own slightly panicked expression. One step too far. Greed is the enemy. Team leader Noda-jiro silently repeated these truths to himself as he quickly made a decision and gave the man with sunglasses a look. The man with sunglasses breathed a sigh of relief, glanced at the document bag in his hand, and immediately apologized. "I'm sorry, it seems I grabbed the wrong one." This should be the correct one. He swiftly switched the document, all the while cursing his team leader in his mind. He had already warned them not to try any tricks, now look at this mess. Not only was it unnecessary, but it also damaged the company's image in the eyes of the client. Even if Komaeda Nagito didn't show it outwardly, he definitely knew what was going on. Earlier, the man with sunglasses and his team leader had actually discussed whether or not to tamper with the contract. He had leaned toward leaving it as it was, but Noda-jiro saw this as a rare opportunity. If they could get Komaeda Nagito to dissolve some previous contracts, Noda-jiro would be hailed as a hero within the company. Besides, based on previous investigations, Komaeda Nagito never consulted a lawyer when signing contracts, so there was a chance it might work. The man with sunglasses had cautiously advised against it, but seeing the team leader's impatience, he hadn't dared to persist. And now, it was clear, Komaeda Nagito wasn't a fool, and the team leader had indeed overreached. After all, Komaeda Nagito had been the looming shadow over their department for nearly 10 years, with all sorts of rumors swirling around. Acting impulsively now, without thinking about the fate of those who had previously dared to mess with Komaeda Nagito, would be unwise. It was time to calm down. That's the reality, the team leader didn't even bother listening. The man with sunglasses thought bitterly. His conservative boss, Noda-jiro, had ignored the sensible advice he'd given earlier, insisting on his own way. Now, the moment Komaeda Nagito spoke up, the team leader immediately backed down. How ironic. This time, Komaeda Nagito smiled as he accepted the contract, briefly skimmed through it, and, sensing no major issues, signed it. He voluntarily relinquished the payout from the 3 kidnappings in exchange for the opportunity to board the Ship of Hope. Both the man with sunglasses and the team leader let out a sigh of relief. The man with sunglasses retrieved 1 copy of the contract, leaving another for Komaeda Nagito. Meanwhile, Noda-jiro began to make small talk, trying to salvage his image and hoping to leave a better impression on Komaeda Nagito. Most importantly, he hoped this small hiccup wouldn't bring him bad luck. He had only entertained the idea, it wasn't like he'd actually done anything, yet. Thank you for your time. Do you have any plans for later? Would you care to join us for a meal? Noda-jiro spoke politely, his manner impeccable, as if he were the perfect leader. Komaeda Nagito shook his head. I'm planning to return to Tokyo in a bit. Noda-jiro instinctively replied, it's on my way. Why don't we travel together? These words were quite common, like offering to escort a guest home. When Noda-jiro said them, he didn't immediately sense anything wrong. But the moment the words left his mouth, he suddenly realized the potential danger. This particular client had an unusually high accident rate. Was he inviting trouble? However, since he had already spoken, it was too late to take it back. Fortunately, Komaeda Nagito didn't seem inclined to accept the offer. Perhaps he preferred being on his own, so he politely declined them. When Noda-jiro had arrived in Yokohama, he had been full of confidence. But now, heading back, he had the expression of someone who had narrowly escaped disaster. That was too risky, even though I don't know why it felt so risky, it just, well, you understand, Noda-jiro rambled to the man with sunglasses during the ride back. That Komaeda fellow is really something strange. Just facing him made me feel like there was something unsettling about his gaze. You'll handle dealing with him from now on. The man with sunglasses maintained a calm expression. After all, the credit would go to the team leader, and the risks would fall on him. But he still had to respond appropriately. Understood. This kid suddenly gave up a huge sum of money to get on that Hope ship. It's not even the VIP spot, it's a passage into the abyss. What exactly is that guy thinking? Truly impossible to understand. No wonder he's the star of all our department's strange stories, he's just not like ordinary people. Oh, right. Team leader Noda-jiro suddenly remembered something. This time, I recall the ship's destination being different from the previous ones. Has the destination changed? That's right, replied the man with sunglasses, dutifully driving while answering his superior's question. This time, the destination is Yokohama Port. It's rumored to be connected to the Port Mafia, but the specifics are unclear. The Port Mafia, huh? Noda pondered, recalling what he had seen in Yokohama this time. Yokohama really is different from a year ago. The Mafia still has its uses, but I still prefer Tokyo. Tokyo feels much safer. Team leader, in Tokyo alone, we've had 2 policyholders who died from murders. If we include those who didn't have our insurance. Noda fell silent. After a moment, the man with sunglasses suddenly remembered something and asked, about the special guests invited by the chairman to board the ship this time. Noda, maintaining his calm demeanor, responded, of course, they're all patrons of the chairman and have purchased our insurance. The man with sunglasses turned slightly pale. Wait. Team leader, shouldn't we calculate something? If the ship sinks or if the special guests meet with any accidents, wouldn't the payout for their insurance exceed the amount Komai Nagito waived for us this time? That's exactly why I'm the team leader. Of course, I've already factored that in, Noda said confidently. Since this time it's related to the Port Mafia, if anything happens, the Port Mafia will have to take half the responsibility. So, the amount we'd have to pay out would definitely be less than what we saved thanks to Komai Nagito. So, letting Komai Nagito board the ship won't be a problem. The man with sunglasses. Team leader, it seems like you're already assuming that something will happen to the ship. Unexpectedly becoming a legendary figure within the insurance company, Komai Nagito had no idea what plans the 2 people who had just left were making for him. Just as they departed, he got a call from the hospital. Komai-kun, all your health check results have come in. The doctor, who was quite familiar with Komai Nagito, didn't waste time with small talk and got straight to the point. You mentioned having headaches recently, right? There's a very mild concussion. Did you perhaps hit your head during the kidnapping? These kidnappers always seem to pick up bad habits from movies. Honestly, they should just use anesthetics properly. Last time, when they slashed your neck, they almost caused irreversible damage. But don't worry, it's nothing major. Just avoid any high-risk activities like roller coasters for now. You'd probably vomit and regret your life decisions. Stick to gentler rides like the carousel or Ferris wheel, and you'll be fine. A concussion? Komai asked. Yes, a mild one, the doctor confirmed. But headaches can sometimes be related to stress as well. If you're feeling tense, take a nice vacation. Oh, sorry, I meant it's probably better to rest at home for now. Komai double-checked, so, no signs of brain cancer or anything like that, right? The doctor was speechless for a moment. Komai-kun, if you feel unwell, just come to the hospital. You're a VIP client after all, so no need to go searching the internet for random symptoms. Even a cold could sound like a terminal illness on there. It's not that. I was just... Alright, never mind, I guess my luck isn't so bad after all. Komai Nagito couldn't exactly explain to the doctor that in another world, he had actually suffered from a terminal illness, which was why he asked such questions. The doctor reminded Komai Nagito once again to eat regularly and to take care of his stomach. In short, just be cautious about these things. I'll send the health report to your email later. If you have any more questions about anything, just give me a call. Alright, thank you, doctor. After hanging up the phone, Komai Nagito touched his head. So, there really was nothing wrong. Was it because of these regular health checkups? Could this be considered good luck? If this counts as good luck, then what kind of misfortune is waiting for me next? Komai Nagito lay on the sofa, one hand holding his phone loosely at his side, while the other covered his eyes. In the darkness of his vision, the dull ache in his head couldn't suppress the growing excitement from his successful plan. The Hope. What a beautiful name. Please, let the misfortune at least not happen on the ship of hope. What kind of misfortune will come to balance out this luck of not having a terminal illness? Chapter 26 End. Chapter 27, Why Are You Here? Komaeda Nagito returned to school a day later than everyone else. However, because Komaeda Nagito often found himself in unfortunate circumstances, like getting hit by falling objects, being kidnapped, or getting into car accidents, everyone had become accustomed to it by now. In fact, Komaeda Nagito's homeroom teacher was quite worried, and they specifically asked him about the results of his health check. After confirming that there was nothing wrong, they finally sighed in relief and sent him back to the classroom. The day passed uneventfully. If anything noteworthy happened, it was only that his landlord called Komaeda Nagito, saying they wanted to talk with him after school. Komaeda Nagito thought to himself, so, it's finally happening, and agreed to the landlord's request. Yesterday, when Komaeda Nagito returned to Tokyo and went to retrieve his luggage that had been left behind on Reigo Island due to him turning into a cat, Ayatsuji Yukito had already hinted at this development. "Here, your luggage," Ayatsuji Yukito said as he dragged Komaeda Nagito's suitcase to the door. The hotel collapsed, so it was stuck under the rubbles. "There's still some dirt on it, so clean it yourself when you get back." "I'm just glad to get it back, I don't mind at all." "Thank you for looking after my luggage, Ayatsuji-sensei." Ayatsuji Yukito had grown relatively accustomed to Komaeda Nagito by now, but despite being young, he still couldn't get used to Komaeda Nagito's flowery compliments. The moment he heard that overly polite tone, he immediately cut him off. "It's nothing. The police were the ones who dug it up for you. I was just holding onto it for safekeeping." "I see," Komaeda Nagito replied in his usual calm tone. "Well, the police sure had their work cut out for them." Ayatsuji Yukito let out a cold snort. "Their hard work is far from over." Komaeda Nagito slowly blinked, taking in the comment. "Anyway, it's got nothing to do with you. Go home and pack your luggage," Ayatsuji Yukito said, not bothering to speak much more as he started dismissing him, acting as though he wasn't too close to Komaeda Nagito. Komaeda Nagito, knowing when to take his leave, left without protest. Things like this, Ayatsuji Yukito would never explain in detail, but with Komaeda Nagito's intelligence, there was no issue understanding the underlying meaning. First, Ayatsuji Yukito was clearly under surveillance, and he wasn't too happy about it. Plus, he was likely going to get involved with the police, or rather, with the special division, and it would probably be their bad luck. Second, it was clear that this matter didn't involve Komaeda Nagito directly, and when Ayatsuji Yukito mentioned packing his luggage, he wasn't just referring to the belongings from Reigo Island that Komaeda Nagito had just retrieved. Based on this type of surveillance behavior, and considering that Ayatsuji Yukito had already predicted this during their time on Reigo Island, Komaeda Nagito easily deduced that the best way is for the target's neighbors to also be a member of the special division, as it was much more convenient for them. He realized it would soon be time for him to move again. Ayatsuji Yukito was suggesting that he pack up in preparation for that. Sure enough, on his way to school today, Komaeda Nagito received a notification on his phone. After school, when he got home, he found the landlord waiting for him at the door. It was worth noting that this landlord usually arrived later than scheduled, choosing a time when they were sure Komaeda Nagito would be home, rather than arriving early and waiting at the door. This was very unlike the landlord's usual behavior. It seemed the special division's compensation offer must have been quite generous, making the landlord eager to settle things quickly. As soon as they stepped inside, before even having tea, the landlord got straight to the point. They presented compensation according to the contract and suggested that Komaeda Nagito move out as soon as possible. "It seems the new price for the place is making you quite happy," Komaeda Nagito sighed. With his situation, finding a new rental was truly a hassle. The special division is really finding trouble for him. The landlord, somewhat awkwardly rubbing their hands together, replied, "If you're not satisfied, we can raise the compensation a bit more. You know, I'm not exactly short on money." However, Komaeda Nagito could understand the landlord's excitement. After all, real estate in Japan typically starts losing value the moment it's bought, so being able to sell at a good price would make any landlord eager to act quickly. In the end, Komaeda Nagito agreed to the proposal. After all, Ayatsuji Yukito had already made it clear that he would absolutely have to move out. Even if he refused now, the special division would surely find another way. It wasn't worth causing trouble. With that in mind, Komaeda Nagito accepted the landlord's suggestion and agreed to move out within 3 days. After all, he didn't have many belongings, making the move relatively easy. At worst, he could send some of the less frequently used items to Yokohama in advance. As for where he would stay in the meantime, Komaeda Nagito began to consider his backup plan, which involved staying at a hotel for a short while until he found a new place to rent. For the next 3 days, he was busy preparing for the move and had even planned to stay in a hotel for about 10 days to half a month if necessary. Kudo Shinichi wasn't just speaking casually when he offered help, he had been actively assisting Komaeda Nagito in finding rental options that weren't listed on typical rental websites. However, for the time being, there wasn't much available. Then, during this rather hectic week, on Saturday, the man from Tei Corporation with the sunglasses came to pick up Komaeda Nagito. Actually, before this, while Komaeda Nagito was busy moving, the man with the sunglasses had already informed him in advance, telling him not to return to Yokohama this Saturday, but to stay in Tokyo, as the Ship of Hope would be departing from Tokyo. He also mentioned in passing that the Ship of Hope would stop at Yokohama port, and if Komaeda could leave the ship smoothly at that point, he could disembark directly when it docked in Yokohama. You seem to have a lot of confidence in me. This kind of option is usually not offered to those expected to lose. The man with the sunglasses thought for a moment and then said sincerely, I'm with the insurance company. Besides the police, we know your past experience is the best. As long as you perform as usual, you probably won't lose. I just hope that, at the very least, this time you won't end up in a shipwreck. I wish you the best of luck. Komaeda Nagito. He could roughly guess what the man with the sunglasses was thinking. But in his decade plus of life, after buying so many tickets, he'd only experienced one actual shipwreck, and another time he didn't even board the ship at all. The odds are still pretty low. No matter what others thought, Komaeda Nagito was determined to board the Ship of Hope, whether it was because of the hopeful name or the event organized by the group gathering countless people filled with despair, both deeply intrigued him. On Saturday evening, when the time came, the man with the sunglasses arrived at the hotel to pick up Komaeda Nagito. As they drove, Komaeda Nagito asked, "What do you all do on this ship, gathering so many people filled with despair?" "Sorry, that's confidential." Even participants can't be informed. "I'm not too sure about the past events, but this time, it's related to gambling, right?" The man with the sunglasses nervously glanced at Komaeda through the rearview mirror. "How did you know that?" "Because you let it slip when you tried to convince me not to go earlier." "Ah." The man with the sunglasses looked like he was about to break down. "Sorry, could you pretend you didn't hear that? If my superiors find out I slipped up, I'll be in trouble. I'm not that loose-tongued. But if you tell me everything you know." "Ah, regarding this confidential project, how about telling me what the previous ones were like?" The man in sunglasses, "I really don't know that much." Though he said that, the man in sunglasses still compromised. He had already gotten this far, and letting a slip of the tongue ruin everything now would be tragic. Better to salvage the situation a little. After all, as long as Komaeda Nagito was satisfied, there shouldn't be an issue, right? Thus, Komaeda Nagito successfully acquired information that couldn't be found anywhere online, gaining a general understanding of the Tei Corporation's chairman. Overall, he seemed like a rather sinister old man, fitting a type that Komaeda Nagito despised, someone who simply enjoyed pushing people into despair and watching them struggle. It was so base, like trash, similar to the remnants of the Despair faction. However, Komaeda had to admit that even though this wasn't the chairman's original intention, in an environment so filled with despair, it was indeed the perfect stage for a dazzling display of hope. That's why Komaeda Nagito was genuinely looking forward to this trip. While learning more along the way, the man in sunglasses led Komaeda Nagito to the Tokyo harbor. From the outside, the luxury of the cruise ship was clear, perfectly matching the reputation of the Tei Corporation. However, there was a long line near one of the boarding points, where security checks were being performed. The atmosphere was tense, diminishing the lively mood typically associated with a cruise. The man in sunglasses explained, "You'll enter through this gate, the VIP guests have a separate entrance." It made sense. This type of clearly illegal event would invite trusted VIPs, who wouldn't harm the interests of the group. But for this lot, societal scum, lowlifes, thugs, one couldn't be too sure. Security measures had to ensure that no one snuck in with a cell phone to record anything. Komaeda Nagito got out of the car, and under the guidance of the man in sunglasses, he cut straight to the front of the line. The person responsible for security checks was momentarily bewildered upon seeing Komaeda Nagito. Having worked this job 3 or 4 times, he knew exactly what kind of people participated in these events aboard the cruise ship. Their eyes were dull, their clothes casual or even filthy, and they carried an aura of despair, gloom, and restlessness. In short, they were fringe members of society, some so desperate, they might even kill for money. Because agreeing to come here meant that ordinary ways of making money no longer sufficed for them. They were likely drowning in debt or urgently needed cash. People in that situation had no energy to take care of their appearance or maintain a positive demeanor. But this silver-haired young man was different. He was dressed cleanly and with style, and his clothes looked expensive. His hands were casually tucked into the pockets of his coat, and his posture was confident as he calmly observed his surroundings. There wasn't a trace of panic about him, and he stood out starkly from the other people in line. This was not someone who appeared desperate, hoping to grasp onto one final glimmer of hope through this event. A guest's child, perhaps? "You should head to the other entrance, this place is for, well, people like them," the security guard said bluntly, gesturing at the crowd. None of those being referred to even reacted. They had lost their sense of dignity. It was as though they lived in a different world from ordinary people. These individuals were willing to do anything for money. A few harsh words meant nothing to them, and if they were paid to be hit, they would probably volunteer for that too. The man in sunglasses, facing his colleague's incredulous look that seemed to question his judgment, could only respond in mild exasperation, "No, he's actually a participant." The security checker looked shocked. Did his family just go bankrupt? No, actually, the company still owes him money. It seems like he's here just for fun. Honestly, I think he's out of place standing in line, let's just get him inside quickly. The security checker glanced at Komaeda Nagito with confusion, inwardly cursing. Nowadays, watching a bunch of down-and-outs display the harshness of life wasn't enough, the rich had to join in to see the spectacle up close too. Wealthy people's minds were hard to understand. Unable to resist, the security checker tried to dissuade Komaeda Nagito, who clearly didn't fit the situation. "It's full of shady people inside. Even though we have security, those guys can still do all kinds of unpredictable things. Maybe it's better to reconsider." Komaeda Nagito shook his head. "I've already made up my mind." "All right then." The security checker realized he couldn't change Komaeda Nagito's mind and softened his tone, his attitude completely different from before. "Apologies, I just need to check if you're carrying any prohibited items. Could you hand over your phone?" Komaeda Nagito willingly handed over his phone and cooperated as the security device scanned him. Once that was done, they let him proceed inside. The man in sunglasses bowed as he bid farewell to Komaeda Nagito. "Please take care on your way." Seeing this, the security checker quickly followed suit, bending at a 90-degree angle. "Please take care on your way." The people lined up behind them. What the heck, isn't this special treatment a bit too much? Whose kid is this, coming here with such a calm attitude? Even though the event hadn't started yet, and they hadn't even boarded the ship. Some people's moods were already sinking. Komaeda Nagito climbed up the stairs and boarded the ship, entering the interior of the luxurious vessel. Inside, the place was brightly lit, and countless whispers blended into a murmur, creating a peculiar bustling atmosphere. As he moved further into the floor, apart from those clearly there to participate in the event, only a few men in black sunglasses were present, maintaining order. Higher up, it became obvious what was happening on the upper levels, likely where the guests invited to watch the circus performance were seated. Two groups of people, distinctly divided. Inside the ship, the air conditioning was turned on, and the temperature was just right. For those who had been chilled by the night wind outside, stepping inside immediately brought a sense of warmth and comfort. This warmth seemed to ease the fear of the unknown challenges awaiting in the second half of their lives, making them feel somewhat reassured. However, for Komaeda Nagito, none of this mattered. What attracted him were the places where hope could be born. As soon as he stepped inside, he began observing the scene and the people around him, trying to identify individuals worthy of focus. Unfortunately, most people weren't yet desperate enough. The majority were just anxious and nervous but still clung to the belief that they could be the lucky ones, the ones who would win a huge fortune, safely leave the ship, and sever all ties with this dark world. After all, if they believed they were bound to lose, they wouldn't have signed the contract to board the ship in the first place. Anyone willing to come aboard still thought they had a glimmer of hope. While Komaeda Nagito was surveying his surroundings, someone else was observing him. His relaxed demeanor, standing out starkly from those around him, was certainly noticeable. Said Ozaki Koyo, a port mafia executive, standing by the upper-level glass windows, peering down. After noticing Komaeda Nagito, she gently covered her mouth with her kimono sleeve. That child. Why is he in this kind of place? While talking with the head of the Tei Corporation, Mori Ogai, the leader of the port mafia, sharply picked up on her quiet mumbling nearby. What's the matter, Koyo? He asked. It's nothing, I just spotted an interesting child, Ozaki Koyo said, casting a glance at Dazai Osamu, who was also standing by the glass windows. She didn't explicitly mention the deeper connection between Komaeda Nagito and Dazai Osamu. It doesn't seem like someone who would show up in a place like this. Dazai Osamu tapped lightly on the glass near where Komaeda Nagito was located, saying nothing, but his expression was subtly strange. The Tei Corporation's chairman gave a signal to one of his subordinates, who, breaking into a cold sweat, quickly moved to check the surveillance feed, trying to locate this interesting child. Who the hell are they talking about? Couldn't they at least describe where he is or what he looks like? But superiors rarely made sense. If you couldn't deliver, it was your incompetence. And when the time came to replace you with someone who could do the job, you wouldn't even have a chance to complain. All he could do was try his best to fulfill these unreasonable demands. Fortunately, based on the direction of Ozaki Koyo's gaze and their earlier line of sight, the search area wasn't too large. Especially when he started adjusting the cameras, he quickly realized that the assessment was correct. This person really didn't seem like someone who belonged here. In particular, there was a noticeable circle of space around the boy, with no one willing to stand near him. The surveillance screens were small, but the chairman had a large screen specifically for his own viewing pleasure. The staff quickly projected the image of the silver-haired boy onto the main screen. Both Yodo Kazutaka, the head of the Tei Corporation, and Mori Ogai, the leader of the port mafia, shifted their attention to the image. Yodo Kazutaka was curious. After all, this was an event he had orchestrated. Any strange figures appearing naturally caught his attention. Mori Ogai, on the other hand, knew that Ozaki Koyo wasn't one to make a fuss over trivial matters, so the fact that she took notice indicated something truly unusual about the boy. As their conversation had yet to touch on serious topics, a change of subject for some entertainment seemed fitting. Staring at the silver-haired boy on the large screen, Yodo Kazutaka furrowed his brows. Who found this person? Yodo Kazutaka asked with dissatisfaction. I wanted to see the rawest side of human nature, which is why I had you gather those who have been pushed to their breaking point. What's the deal with this kid? Is he here to cause trouble? Tei Corporation's deputy leader, a middle-aged man named Tonagawa, quickly reported, "This is a special quota, arranged as part of a deal with the insurance company." What? Yodo frowned in confusion. Since when does a minor have the ability to negotiate terms with us? The deputy coughed slightly and explained, "Chairman, I'm not sure if you recall. This kid, his name is Komaeda Nagito. He's considered a high-risk individual in our insurance division. His name appears in our annual reports every single year." Yodo Kazutaka. Damn, he really did remember. For someone like Yodo Kazutaka, at his level of influence, there were very few names that left an impression on him. He could still recall the names of his second and third tier leaders, but by the time it got to the fourth tier, remembering names became a struggle, and he often needed someone to remind him. This was actually quite disrespectful. Under a different company leader, such disregard for people could have led to a lot of behind-the-scenes complaints. But is the chairman of Tei Corporation an ordinary person? Of course not. If he remembers your name, it's an honor. If he doesn't, well, that's just normal. Important people have busy schedules, no one would harbor resentment just because of that. For Yodo Kazutaka to have an impression of someone, or even to remember their name, it spoke volumes. Mori Ogai, listening to this peculiar introduction, found it quite amusing. "So, what's up with this kid?" "Nothing much, just someone with incredibly bad luck." The typically lethargic Dazai Osamu unexpectedly chimed in, cutting Mori Ogai off. Mori Ogai immediately turned to look at him, eyes filled with surprise. "Dazai-kun, you know him?" Ozaki Koyo cleared her throat and offered an explanation on Dazai Osamu's behalf. "That kid once came to headquarters looking for Dazai-kun." Mori Ogai was shocked. "How do I not know about this? Someone coming to see Dazai Osamu? Such an incident should have stirred up some gossip, right? He was the leader, after all. Why hadn't anyone reported such an important matter to him?" Ozaki Koyo actually felt a bit conflicted. Initially, she didn't want to involve ordinary people in the affairs of the port mafia. She had even informed Dazai Osamu about this and later dealt with some of the rumor-spreading members. Naturally, after that, no one at headquarters dared to mention it again. By the time Mori Ogai had finished dealing with his own matters, the situation had already been smoothed over. But now that the kid had reappeared in their world, she couldn't just turn a blind eye. She gave Dazai Osamu a look, signaling him to handle it himself. After all, she also wanted to understand what kind of attitude he had towards that boy. "It's just a small matter, Mori-sama need not worry," Dazai Osamu said, still showing respect to the leader in front of others, speaking politely. If there were no outsiders around, his words might not have been so pleasant. Dazai-kun forming connections is hardly a small matter, Mori Ogai responded tactfully, mindful of the presence of others. He couldn't speak too directly, so he added more diplomatically, "But at your age, Dazai-kun, it's natural to make more friends." "He's not a friend, just someone I know," Dazai Osamu said flatly. Ozaki Koyo stood to the side, her gaze subtly fixed on Dazai Osamu. "You didn't say it like that in the elevator last time." This wasn't a good sign. Considering Dazai Osamu's status, for him to casually declare someone a friend in a dangerous situation didn't necessarily mean he truly valued the person. Otherwise, he would certainly consider whether his actions might endanger the other party. However, even a joke can sometimes carry a hint of sincerity. At the time, Ozaki Koyo had already found Dazai Osamu's attitude towards the boy somewhat strange. Now, hearing this, was it because Boss Mori was the one asking, so Dazai Osamu was being more cautious than when he had spoken to her? Or could it be that Dazai Osamu had changed his mind? Ozaki Koyo couldn't be certain and decided to step in to ease the situation for now. "It's probably related to that time someone rented our warehouse and ended up using it for a kidnapping, which led to 2 of the kidnappers' deaths." Based on the available information, Mori Ogai came to a conclusion. "So, Are you saying the person who was kidnapped? Dazai Osamu readily replied, it was him. Mori Ogai couldn't help but twitch at the corners of his mouth. What a coincidence. Actually, Mori Ogai didn't fully trust the implications behind Dazai Osamu's words. If their relationship was really that insignificant, why would he come all the way to headquarters just to find Dazai? However, this wasn't the right setting to dig deeper, so it was better to leave it for later. It wasn't that Mori Ogai was nosy, it's just that having a friend, especially for someone as difficult to control as Dazai Osamu, was a good thing from Mori Ogai's perspective. If he could confirm the importance of that boy to Dazai Osamu, Mori Ogai could potentially leverage that as a weakness to control him. Mori Ogai's intentions were crystal clear to Dazai Osamu. After all, this was a familiar script that Mori Ogai often played out, one that he knew all too well. But instead of getting angry, Dazai Osamu almost found it amusing. Right now, Mori Ogai still didn't know Komai de Nagito well enough. If he ever tried to control Komai de Nagito after getting to know him better, Dazai Osamu could guarantee that Mori Ogai would become a legendary figure in the insurance world, with everyone in the business hailing him as a genius. Chapter 27 End. Chapter 28, The Only Thing That Will Not Die is Beauty. Dazai Osamu absent-mindedly looked at the figure below. Although he had been busy these past few days handling matters between the Port Mafia and the Tei Corporation, and because of the distant attitude Komai de Nagito had shown him the last time, Dazai Osamu hadn't reached out to Komai de Nagito, but Oda Sakanosuke still exchanging thoughts on writing with Komai de Nagito. While the three of them were chatting at the bar, when this topic suddenly came up, even Sakaguchi Ango found it strange and asked, "How often do you two talk?" "I've recently been keeping up with a pace of one short story per day, so we do communicate quite often," Oda Sakanosuke said. "Before starting, I thought it would be very difficult, but once I began writing, I found it to be rather easy. Now, the number of words I write each day keeps increasing. Perhaps after a while, I'll be able to start writing a full-length novel." "Sakaguchi Ango. Can I take a look? Is your productivity really that high? I can't even imagine it." "Oda Saku, are you sure this is your first time writing a novel?" Oda Sakanosuke shook his head. "Writing is fast, but revising is slow. I'll let you all see it once I've finished the revisions." "Then why are you showing it to that Komaeda-kun?" Sakaguchi Ango immediately felt something strange. Their old group of friends was being outdone by a recently acquainted teenager. Did this person have some special quality? "Because you guys are very busy. Lately, you've been coming to Lupin less frequently, right?" Dazai Osamu asked curiously, "Has Komaeda-kun given you a lot of feedback on your writing?" "Rather than saying he gives me feedback on my writing." Oda Sakanosuke showed a thoughtful expression, taking out his phone and opening his inbox. "Actually, our exchanges aren't limited to my novel. We also recommend recently published books to each other, as well as our thoughts on those books. It's more like a book friend, I would say." What? Dazai Osamu leaned closer to take a look. "About death. You two even discuss this?" Dazai quickly pulled up the email and skimmed through the contents. "Even death cannot separate us. Are these words meant to express eternal togetherness or love that transcends death? Why does love always seem to need the element of death? Do you really need to discuss this? Oda Saku, you really don't have a romantic bone in your body. You shouldn't force yourself to write love stories." Sakaguchi Ango adjusted his glasses and joked, "Isn't that the kind of sweet talk shared between couples? But when faced with actual life-threatening danger, one might end up abandoning the other and running away." "Exactly, if you check the news, you'll often see stories where one person dies while the other survives." "Ah, but if a double suicide actually succeeds, that would be something. Maybe I should try it next time." Dazai Osamu suddenly seemed to get some sort of inspiration from that email, looking unexpectedly excited. Sakaguchi Ango ignored Dazai's tangent and asked, But why did you end up discussing this topic? Oda-saku, did you write these words? No, Oda-saku Nosuke denied. I was just discussing with Komaeda-kun about a book I recently read. I couldn't quite understand the emotional development between the male and female protagonists. Later, I thought it might be because I used to be an assassin, so my perspective on death is probably different from that of an ordinary person. I just wanted to get Komaeda-kun's thoughts to understand better. Dazai Osamu. Sakaguchi Ango. Although Sakaguchi Ango had never met Komaeda Nagito, as someone responsible for intelligence, especially with Dazai Osamu repeatedly mentioning him, it was only natural that he would investigate a bit. Therefore, his understanding of Komaeda Nagito was fairly solid, which led him to inwardly curse when he heard what Oda-saku Nosuke said. Oda-saku, are you sure you want to refer to that guy's thoughts? I think your definition of normal people might have some issues. Dazai Osamu couldn't hold back and twitched the corner of his mouth as he scrolled through the email, intending to see Komaeda Nagito's response. Dazai Osamu let out a surprised sound. Komaeda-kun has some interesting thoughts. Sakaguchi Ango waited for a moment, realizing that Dazai Osamu didn't seem inclined to read it out loud like before. His curiosity got the better of him, so he moved closer to take a look as well. Moreover, death will not stop them from loving each other, death will make them even closer than they were in life. Sakaguchi Ango recited the words with a strange expression, immediately adding, I feel like that's not the thought of a normal person, Oda-saku. You shouldn't misunderstand. But, it does make sense, Oda-saku Nosuke calmly replied. In life, there could be many problems that stand between them, but after death, those issues no longer matter. They would indeed be closer to each other than they were in life. Dazai Osamu stood next to Oda-saku Nosuke, saying, I also think those words make a lot of sense. Many people who commit double suicides, isn't it just because there are too many factors in reality that prevent them from being together? Sakaguchi Ango held his forehead, exasperated. Dazai, stop complicating things. What are the two of you, who've never been in love, even agreeing on here? Listen clearly. If you truly love someone, even if you're dead, you'd still hesitate to let the other person die. Double suicides are just irresponsible actions. Oda-saku Nosuke unintentionally added a jab, Ango, have you ever been in love? Sakaguchi Ango. Dazai Osamu drew out his voice, saying, in the end, this is just Ango's personal opinion, isn't it? You can't represent everyone, can you? I, for one, think double suicides are not bad. Alright, it's true I can only represent myself, but I still insist. If you truly meet someone you love deeply, you might change your mind. Sakaguchi Ango adjusted his glasses, trying to salvage his companion's views on love, speaking personally, important people or things, ideals. Some things are worth risking my life to protect. Dazai Osamu, on this topic, suddenly shifted from his previous playful tone, displaying a kind of cold and disdainful attitude. No matter how important something is, the more you don't want to lose it, the more you will. Since it's all the same in the end, why not choose a double suicide? At least, until death, you'd still have the other person. Just as the atmosphere became a bit heavy due to Dazai Osamu's words, Oda-saku Nosuke suddenly remembered something. It seems like Komaeda-kun also said something similar. Dazai and Komaeda-kun really are alike. As he spoke, he started flipping through emails. It should be. Got it, it's in this email. Dazai Osamu's previously relaxed and indifferent expression subtly changed as he quietly stared at the phrase displayed for him on the screen. The only thing that will not die is beauty, and for us, only what dies with us will not truly die. Dazai-kun? Ozaki Koyo's voice brought Dazai Osamu back from his thoughts. Were you listening to what I just said? Dazai Osamu raised a smile and replied, I was listening. For Dazai Osamu, multitasking was basic procedure. Even if 10 Mori Ogais were talking to him about different topics simultaneously, it wouldn't affect his ability to space out without neglecting his actual work. So, tell me what you think, Ozaki Koyo said, slightly furrowing her brows. Given the current situation, once this voyage ended, Mori Ogai would definitely ask her for information on Komai de Nagito. Before that happened, she wanted to confirm Dazai-Osamu's stance on this. Like I said earlier, Komai de Nagito's information is public. It's entirely up to you how you handle it, Koyone-san, Dazai-Osamu calmly replied, even smiling as he added, honestly, I'm looking forward to the moment when Boss Mori gets dubbed the light of the insurance world by those working in the industry. The insurance world had suffered under Komai de Nagito for a long time. If Mori Ogai could actually manage to deal with him, erecting a shrine in his honor and calling him the guardian deity of the insurance industry wouldn't be out of the question. Ozaki Koyo sighed. You really aren't worried at all, are you? That's hardly the attitude one would have toward a friend. Was I overthinking it after all? Ozaki Koyo mused. Koyone-san, worrying too much will make you age faster, you know? Dazai-Osamu teased with a smile. It's not really important when it comes to Komai de-kun, but there's something you haven't found in the information, so I need to emphasize it a bit. Ozaki Koyo straightened up, sensing that something important was coming up. What is it? Dazai-Osamu spoke each word carefully. Komai de-kun doesn't have any abilities. Ozaki Koyo. Ozaki Koyo was genuinely shocked. From the moment she obtained Komai de Nagito's information, she had accepted that Komai de Nagito was an ability user. On one hand, because Komai de Nagito's experiences were too legendary, and on the other hand, because Dazai-Osamu paid excessive attention to him, Ozaki Koyo instinctively believed that anyone who could attract Dazai-Osamu's attention like that must be special. No ability, are you sure? Ozaki Koyo asked in astonishment, covering her mouth. His experiences. Confirmed, it's all just coincidences. Dazai-Osamu lifted the corners of his mouth, his expression strange as he spoke. Maybe it's because we're ability users that we've unconsciously been brainwashed by the special ability theory, becoming overly arrogant and assuming that, aside from ability users, ordinary people aren't worth mentioning. But this world is actually far more miraculous than we think. Ozaki Koyo's expression turned subtle as she pondered for a moment, then sighed. You're right. Even without abilities, miraculous things can certainly happen to ordinary people. And for Komai de-kun, it's probably better that he isn't an ability user. Probably. Dazai-Osamu shrugged. If he doesn't have an ability, it also means that not even I can alter his fate. Even if something Komai de-kun doesn't want to happen is about to occur, no one can stop it. From that perspective, I don't think it's necessarily a good thing, you know? Ozaki Koyo shot him an angry glare. Stop complaining when you're already in a fortunate position. He knew exactly what she was referring to. If she were to submit the information she had previously gathered as it is, Boss Mori would undoubtedly reach the same conclusion she just did, assuming Komai de Nagito is an ability user. This would then lead to a series of actions targeting Komai de Nagito. However, with Dazai-kun now telling her to add the key term, non-ability user, the nature of the situation changes. At the very least, before confirming whether or not this information is accurate, Boss Mori is unlikely to act rashly, as there is a lot of uncertainty and coincidences surrounding Komai de Nagito. She hadn't expected that Dazai-Osamu would go to such lengths for someone who, just a while ago, was merely a casual acquaintance like Komai de Nagito. Ozaki Koyo's curiosity was once again piqued. In an organization like the Port Mafia, where the nature of it is particularly unique, maintaining distance and not prying into the personal lives and secrets of colleagues is a basic rule of conduct. But the last time they met in the elevator, Dazai-Osamu hadn't avoided her and casually spoke. This time, Ozaki Koyo didn't hold back and asked directly. Have your relations improved over the past couple of days? After he left the headquarters last time, we haven't been in contact. Ozaki Koyo showed an expression of disappointment, as though she hadn't gotten the gossip she wanted to hear. There's no need for Dazai-Osamu to lie to her about this kind of thing. After all, if Dazai-Osamu truly didn't want to talk, no one could force him, and if he wanted to give a dismissive answer, he could even use the truth to mislead. So, they're just plastic acquaintances, and gradually drifting apart. What are you even doing? Ozaki Koyo sighed. If that's the case, wouldn't it have been better not to get involved with him in the first place? Dazai-Osamu theatrically sighed, and whether genuine or not, said, if Komai-Dakuen could be so boring that I could ignore him, that would be fine. But it's impossible to ignore him, isn't it? He always shows up in unexpected places. Ozaki Koyo's gaze followed Dazai-Osamu's, through the window and down below, and she remained silent. The event had already begun. While they had been chatting, a few black-clad men below had started distributing identification tags to the participants. Originally, this segment was supposedly held in the preparation room for the event, but due to the presence of distinguished guests this time, they decided to let the guests enjoy every part of the process. As a result, the location was moved to the main hall. The game on this gambling ship was advertised with the promise that winning would not only clear all debts owed before boarding, but could also earn you hundreds of millions of yen. This attracted people who, for various reasons, found themselves at the end of their rope. However, since the game had not yet started, the money being handed out now was clearly not the prize advertised. If Yodo Kazutaka wanted to witness the raw essence of human nature, to see people struggling in the depths of despair, then every segment of this event would be designed to kick those down on their luck rather than offering a lifeline in times of crisis. The money handed out was forcibly lent to the participants, with the interest compounding every hour. Before long, the interest rates would reach the levels of predatory loans. For those who had already come to participate due to debts, by the time the game ended, they might end up owing even more money than before. This was meant to increase the sense of urgency for the participants, pushing them not to delay and to finish their actions as quickly as possible. The sooner they ended the game, the less they would owe, and the more they could use to cover their previous debts or claim their prize money. However, since the game rules hadn't been explained yet, and it was unclear if the game would require large sums of money, being forced to borrow at the start left everyone feeling very reluctant. Already burdened with debt, how could they casually increase new debt? The debts on the ship would not be entirely erased even if they won, so most people only borrowed the minimum amount allowed by the rules, 1 million yen. That included Komai de Nagito. But he was different from the others. In fact, he had already seen through the purpose of this forced borrowing. The president of Tei doesn't lack this kind of loan shark money, this is probably just to add a bit of excitement. It's actually quite clear, if they're making you borrow money at this point, it means that the amount of money you have will have a certain impact on the later game. Considering the nature of gambling and the president's objective, the importance of money is obvious. Analyzing it to this degree, any ordinary person would understand that if money is so important, they should, of course, borrow the maximum amount allowed at this time. But Komai de Nagito's thought process was different from normal people's. He insisted on doing the opposite. If having more money is better, then of course I would choose the greatest difficulty. Who knows, there might be some hidden reward. Komai de Nagito having such thoughts was partly due to his own personality, but also because of something he had once experienced. Before coming to this world, he had entered a death room, and the final challenge was Russian roulette. The challenge was to randomly place a bullet in the chamber and then shoot himself. If he survived an empty chamber, it would count as a win, but if he was hit by the bullet, well, if you're dead, that's obviously a loss. The original rule of Russian roulette was that out of 6 chambers, only one would be loaded with a bullet. However, Komai de Nagito's action at that time was just to remove one bullet, raising the probability of death from 1/6 to 5/6. But Komai de Nagito won, and because he had cleared the highest difficulty level, he received a hidden reward. Due to this experience with Russian roulette, Komai de Nagito decided to apply the same tactic this time, wanting to test his luck and see if it would trigger some kind of special event. However, what followed left him disappointed. As everyone finished borrowing money and registering, a man in black sunglasses began explaining the rules of the game, instructing them to open the 2 document bags handed out along with the token they had just received. Inside one of the bags were 3 star-shaped items, adhesive on the back, which could be stuck onto the badge they had just received to wear on their chest. In the other document bag were 12 cards, with 4 cards each showing rock, paper, and scissors. The man in black proceeded to explain the rules of the game. Before the set time limit of 4 hours ends, you must use all of your cards. Each time you lose, you will lose 1 star. When time is up, those who have 3 stars or more and have used all their cards will be considered the winners. The cards have a sensor embedded in them. On the dueling platform, you must throw the used cards into the slot on the table. The screen in this hall will display in real time how many of each type of card remain. It is forbidden to discard cards, damage cards, or... The man in black began listing a series of rule violations, and judging from the numerous warnings, it seemed that many of the previous participants had tried to pull off various small tricks. Komaeda Nagito summarized the situation. Overall, the game involved using cards to play rock-paper-scissors with other players. You could lose or you could win, but ultimately, the cards represented opportunities, while the stars represented life. As long as you still had stars, you hadn't completely lost your chance. After a long string of warnings, when Komaeda Nagito didn't hear the phrase, "trading cards is forbidden," he instantly understood the true purpose of money in this game. If your stars were insufficient but you had no cards left, you could buy cards from others to gain more chances. You could also directly purchase stars from those who had extras. Those stars would certainly be very expensive, especially as the game neared its final stages, where a single star could cost as much as 100 million yen. After all, in this game, losing meant losing your life, but if you won, clearing your debts would be like a rebirth, giving you a completely different life from before. As long as they could win, these players would be willing to pay any price. Unfortunately for Komaeda Nagito, realizing this so much earlier than the others didn't bring him any joy from having figured out the game's rules. Instead, it left him feeling deeply disappointed, so much so that he couldn't help but voice his frustration as soon as he understood. What is this? At this level, it doesn't even count as increasing the difficulty, because no matter how much money I have, I won't need to use it. But there was no helping it. The people who designed this were thinking of the general public, not someone like him, so it was normal that they wouldn't account for everything. Even with the limited number of rock-paper-scissors matches allowed, the essence of this game still had an element of luck. And as long as it involved luck, Komaeda Nagito didn't need to play by any rules. For others, this might be about betting everything, but for Komaeda Nagito, he didn't even need to take it seriously. There was no pressure at all. Well, whatever, it's not like I came here just to play this game. He came to see if, in this atmosphere filled with negativity and despair, hope could emerge. Participating was secondary, observing how others acted was his main goal. Thinking like that, Komaeda Nagito felt much more at ease. His quiet murmuring was overheard by a middle-aged man standing beside him. This man had a prominent chin and appeared more composed than the surrounding people, who were filled with confusion and fear. After hearing Komaeda Nagito's words, he couldn't help but turn to look at him. Compared to the difference between himself and others, Komaeda Nagito stood out even more distinctly from the rest. The middle-aged man with the prominent chin pondered for a moment, noticing how Komaeda Nagito seemed completely unbothered by the earlier speech from Tei Corporation's deputy leader. He then took the initiative to talk to Komaeda Nagito. "Youngster, judging by your appearance, it seems like you're not lacking in money at all. So why did you get on this ship?" Komaeda Nagito responded coldly, "Could you not talk to me? I honestly can't imagine why you would have the audacity to show your face here." The middle-aged man with the prominent chin, stunned by the sudden reproach, responded. "Sorry, did I offend you somehow?" "Sigh," Komaeda Nagito sighed, "if saying it will make you get away from me, then, this isn't your first time participating in this event, is it?" The middle-aged man was clearly taken aback. Komaeda Nagito didn't intend to explain how he figured it out, because from his perspective, it was so obvious there was no need for further explanation, and he continued speaking. Except for someone like me, the selection criteria for participants is pretty consistent, Komaeda Nagito said coldly. In other words, during your first participation, you were still at the bottom rung of society, nothing but trash. After winning once, you thought you'd found the key to victory. So now you're planning to rely on your previous experience to devise a plan and trick the newcomers into trusting you. Wait a minute. The middle-aged man tried to cut him off, but Komaeda Nagito only grew more intrigued as he spoke. I'm wondering what method you'll use. The most basic plan is probably something like, let's work together, always tie in rock paper scissors so we don't lose any stars while using up our cards. And then somewhere along the way, you'd betray them. Ah, judging by your expression, I was right, wasn't I? Since the deputy leader was still giving his speech, although there was no rule against talking, the room remained quiet. At least, everyone nearby had heard clearly, and they silently looked at the middle-aged man, memorized his face, and quietly moved away from him. The middle-aged man. Damn, half of the plan is ruined, but at least not many people heard it. Still, it doesn't explain why this person dislikes him so much. Komaeda Nagito analyzed him for a moment, then concluded. You're incapable. Clearly, you could have left this place and moved forward, yet you only seek validation among trash, feeling cheap satisfaction. People like you are hopeless. Even your breathing near me disgusts me. How can you still shamelessly exist? The middle-aged man. With such intelligent and such a sharp mind, why are you even here in a place like this? Just to mess with people? Chapter 28 End. Chapter 29, Reunion on the Ship of Hope. This small-scale argument in the lobby was broadcast live on the screen in the guest room, specially set up for the Mafia Port members invited by the Tei Corporation chairman. Yodo the old man, who always enjoyed stirring up trouble among his subordinates, was in his element. The black-suited staff selected for this event by the Tei Corporation were all masters of emotional intelligence, highly skilled at reading the room and adapting to situations on the fly. In the guest room for VIPs, one of the black-suited staff responsible for monitoring the footage gave a signal, and immediately, another black-suited staff member approached Komaeda Nagito in the lobby. They used their cameras and recording devices to contribute to the observations being made in the guest room. Mori Ogai, seeing Komaeda Nagito's outburst live for the first time, let out an expression of meaningless surprise. Wow! This kid is clever, but his personality seems a bit extreme. It's hard to imagine how Dazai-kun interacts with someone like this. He tilted his head and noticed that Dazai Osamu and Ozaki Koyo also had expressions of surprise and amazement. Mori Ogai. What are you both so surprised about? Haven't you already seen his file and even met him in person? Even Yodo the old man, who was observing the whole conversation, also raised an eyebrow. However, it wasn't out of anger but out of sheer delight, so much that it even led to an odd chuckle of amusement. Heh heh heh, this kid really has some personality. Despite something happening to him every year, with luck so bad it couldn't get worse, he should be more worried about himself. Yodo the old man still remembered, each year the insurance department's annual report spammed this name, making him wonder how anyone could have such terrible luck. Dazai Osamu and Ozaki Koyo, the only two here who had carefully reviewed Komaeda Nagito's detailed files, exchanged a glance. They could both sense the subtle hint of amusement in each other's eyes, as if waiting for the drama to unfold. Indeed, from the perspective of outsiders who only knew a bit about Komaeda Nagito, his luck truly seemed abysmal. This is why, despite the Special Division's clear focus on Yokohama, they have never placed Komaeda Nagito on their watch list. Komaeda Nagito's misfortune and fortune, most of the time, are actually like flipping a coin, a random stroke of luck, like buying a drink and unexpectedly winning a prize. The connection is very loose, and even the timing is inconsistent, sometimes happening very quickly, other times taking a long while in between. Unless someone observes Komai de Nagito 365 days a year, documenting every single thing he encounters, no one would pay attention to these seemingly insignificant, everyday occurrences. Only well-known events, like the meteorite fall incident or getting kidnapped and then accidentally winning a lottery ticket, which have very strong connections, can make people take notice and double-check, thinking it seems a bit too coincidental. But such events don't happen every day, and many things can actually be explained rationally. What? The number of times he's been kidnapped seems a bit much? Well, nothing can be done about it. Yokohama is chaotic, and he's a minor living alone. It's easy for people to find out he has money. Who else would kidnappers target? This just shows the kidnappers are well informed, quite ordinary, really. What? Every time he gets kidnapped, he somehow survives until he's rescued, with an unusually high survival rate? Well, Look, that time it was because the kidnappers were idiots and had anger management issues. They couldn't swallow their pride when someone in a fancy car provoked them, so they just had to challenge them, which ended in a car accident. Although no one was seriously hurt, they got caught by traffic police who arrived quickly, and rescuing Komai de Nagito was just incidental. And then that other time, the kidnappers were too slow to act. A neighbor saw them while out buying groceries and casually reported it to the police. Our police were effective in their response. Do you have any objections to that? And then there was also that time, 2 kidnappers, before they could even get their hands on the ransom, fought over an uneven share of their stolen goods. One killed the other and dumped the body on the road, only to run into a spontaneous DUI checkpoint, where the police found the body in the car. After they were taken to the station and questioned, the process of rescuing the kidnapped person was uncovered. No matter how you look at it, Komai de Nagito was just unlucky to have been kidnapped. Everything that happened afterward had nothing to do with him, okay? Oh, if you really want to say there's a connection, he did once manage to talk a kidnapper into confessing through sheer persuasive talk. But can that really be chalked up to good luck? Clearly, that was based on skill. It's exactly like that. Even the police department's impression of Komai de Nagito was simply, a guy with extremely bad luck, constantly encountering dangerous situations. The most significant thing is that relatively superstitious events tend to occur, like when Komai de Nagito felt unfortunate to have lost my best friend, but the whole family luckily avoided boarding a doomed ship. But to others, it was just that a classmate had passed away, so everyone gathered to mourn, leading the Komai de family to cancel whatever cruise they had booked. Would you pay that much detailed attention to a random passerby? No, you wouldn't. Even neighbors would likely only know that they originally planned to travel but later cancelled. They wouldn't randomly remember what cruise the family was supposed to take. Even if the newspapers reported on related events, it wouldn't necessarily connect them to the neighbor's child. Similarly, the special division wouldn't investigate someone who, on the surface, seemed like an ordinary person, someone with pretty bad luck, who only occasionally gets a lucky break like winning the lottery as compensation for his tragic life. Why would anyone assume that someone's special ability is making themselves unlucky? Only when all the fragmented or major events were pieced together and laid out clearly could Komai de Nagito's luck finally become somewhat noticeable. Upon reviewing the gathered data, even though Dazai-Osamu had already described everything in detail, Sakaguchi Ango was still taken aback when he saw it all at once. Have all these events been verified? The special division agent responded, some of them can only be confirmed by asking the individual directly, but we can confirm the significant ones. Sakaguchi Ango felt a headache coming on. Even just looking at the verifiable events, Komai de Nagito's luck seemed somewhat beyond normal. The daily minor misfortunes and small strokes of luck were marked with question marks when being assessed, because even for regular people, life isn't always smooth sailing, sometimes things go wrong, and sometimes luck favors them, which is completely normal. Most people wouldn't count parents passing away and inheriting an estate as luck, so when everything was pieced together, the overall impression Komai de Nagito gave was still one of misfortune. The people at the special division, as government officials, are trained not to fall into the gambler's fallacy, where unrelated events are forcibly linked together as evidence of alternating luck and misfortune. As such, they can only rely on common knowledge, focusing on events that have a clear cause and effect relationship. Although Komaeda Nagito seems to be quite unlucky, no matter what kind of danger he faces, he always manages to survive. This is the level of understanding that most people who are familiar with him have come to. Some seemingly unrelated unlucky events led Komaeda Nagito to have to change his original plans, resulting in something good happening. Alternatively, if he had followed the original plan, he might have encountered even worse luck. In conclusion, his misfortune ended up helping him. This is the insight drawn after the Special Division started monitoring him. By collecting and organizing vast amounts of intelligence, they were finally able to reach a deeper conclusion. Could his ability really be a 100% chance of surviving disasters? Sakaguchi Ango's mouth twitched. He thought that such an ability wasn't too bad after all, and didn't warrant the Special Division's surveillance. Even with the most catastrophic event of a meteor falling from the sky, it only managed to kill the kidnappers and his parents, without causing more casualties. In comparison, the detective from Tokyo, Ayatsuji Yukido, who has a 100% death rate for criminals in the cases he solved, seems even more dangerous. Soon, contact with him will be necessary. Just after Sakaguchi Ango finished reviewing Komaeda Nagito's file, the next day, Dazai Osamu told him he was certain Komaeda Nagito didn't have any abilities. Sakaguchi Ango. Say that again. Who doesn't have abilities? No matter how much Sakaguchi Ango couldn't believe it, Dazai Osamu remained adamant that Komaeda Nagito had no abilities. Sakaguchi Ango felt that Dazai Osamu had no reason to lie to him in this situation, which made him immediately feel apologetic toward his colleagues in the Special Division. He had given them an ordinary person and had them compile an incredibly detailed file on Komaeda Nagito as if he were an ability user. They even speculated on several possible conditions that could trigger his ability. And now Dazai was telling him that Komaeda was just a regular person, albeit with unusual luck, and not someone the Special Division should be concerned with at all. Sakaguchi Ango could already imagine how many people in the Special Division would feel like coughing up blood when he reported back with this new information. Previously, everyone thought he was just an ordinary person with slightly bad luck, but Dazai insisted there was a chance he wasn't, so they all went to investigate. Then, everyone stayed up late, working overtime and painstakingly dug into the matter, and they actually found evidence suggesting he might be an ability user. Now Dazai was saying the guy was just an ordinary person. If Sakaguchi Ango hadn't experienced it himself, he would have thought someone was deliberately playing a cruel joke on them. Chief Taneda still reassured him, "This isn't your fault. Consider it as helping everyone broaden their horizons. The world is vast, and there's all kinds of strange occurrences. Even if he's not an ability user, strange things can still happen around him. If he hadn't been truly suspicious, it wouldn't have reached the investigation stage. You merely brought up his name." This was how the matter was reluctantly put to rest. But overall, Komaeda Nagito's luck was so legendary in the Special Division that it was known as miraculous. Dealing with a coward's game of rock-paper-scissors, there was really no need to worry. Even if he lost, he still had the money to buy his way out. Because even Yodo the old man found Komaeda Nagito relatively interesting, in the guest room, out of the 3 large screens, 2 were randomly scanning for intriguing scenes, while the remaining screen was fixed on Komaeda Nagito's display. Komaeda Nagito casually agreed to a challenge from someone. The 2 of them selected a dual platform, stood facing each other, and simultaneously raised the cards in their hands, the backs of the cards facing outward. Confirm. After both confirmed their moves, they placed their cards on the table, then simultaneously revealed them. The first round, Komaeda Nagito won, and the other person lost a star. Unwilling to accept that their luck was so bad, the person, likely wanting to reclaim their lost star, insisted, "One more time. If I suggest that you switch opponents now, you wouldn't listen to me, would you?" Komaeda Nagito sighed. "Don't focus only on what you've lost. Otherwise, not only will you fail to reclaim the star that originally belonged to you, but you might also completely lose your chance, you know? Stop talking nonsense. What do you know? The other person bite their lip, pulling out another card. Confirm. The black-suited person operating the camera, positioned opposite Komai de Nagito and behind the opponent, clearly captured the card the opponent was about to play on the screen. Same card as before, huh? Mori Ogai stroked his chin. It seems they think Komai de-kun won't play the same card again, so this way they either win or it's a draw, right? It wasn't that Mori Ogai didn't want to discuss serious matters with the Yodo old man, but observing this activity was one of the old man's pleasures. Currently, the Port Mafia was at a disadvantage, so playing along with his interests and slowly shifting the conversation to important topics was the wiser choice. Sure enough, the Yodo old man smoothly continued, "Ha ha ha, such a commoner's thought process is really easy to understand. But what card will that kid play? Care to make a bet?" Here it comes. The Yodo old man's favorite thing. Mori Ogai perked up. What are we betting on? Let's bet on the cooperation you mentioned earlier. Based on our last negotiation, if you guess correctly, I'll be willing to concede 1%. But if you lose, you have to yield 1%. Mori Ogai glanced at Ozaki Koyo through the screen's reflection, noticing her signaling him. He immediately responded, agreed. What about you, Dazai-kun? At this moment, the two participants on the screen had already placed their cards on the table, and they were about to reveal the results, making their bet irreversible. Without much thought, Dazai-osamu replied, draw. Oh. Yodo the old man gave Dazai-osamu a sideways glance. You're betting that kid will play the same card as before? Lucky 2 times in a row. Why does this Port Mafia boy have so much confidence in that kid? Isn't he just the person who constantly files claims with the insurance company? Is there something about this Komai de Nagito that he doesn't know? Either way, it's only a 1% concession. Even if I lose, the boss won't fire me, Dazai-osamu joked lightly. At times like this, of course, you should hope that the person you know wins. Mori Ogai. Although Mori Ogai knew that Dazai probably wasn't betting randomly and had some level of certainty, he still felt that Dazai's earlier words were serious, implying that if this gamble went wrong, there wasn't much anyone could do about it. If it weren't for the fact that Dazai was the one initially handling dealings with the Tei Corporation, it wouldn't have been appropriate to sideline him. Mori Ogai would have preferred to switch in Chuya. On the screen, Komai de Nagito followed the same process as before, revealing his card. It was indeed a tie. The Yodo old man's expression immediately darkened. Although it was just a casual bet, the Yodo old man hated the feeling of losing. Thankfully, the concession wasn't much, so it wasn't enough to make him feel heartache, but it still left him feeling quite uncomfortable. Komai de Nagito also felt quite displeased. I actually won, he rubbed his forehead, as if deeply dissatisfied with the result. There was no helping it. For Komai de Nagito, who eagerly awaited grand strokes of luck and hoped to witness the blossoming of true hope, these small instances of good fortune were nothing more than meaningless, tiresome distractions. Always winning only left him feeling disappointed because it meant the chances of his true hopes being realized were gradually diminishing. However, others couldn't understand Komai de Nagito's frustration. The person across from him, who was down to his last star and still had 10 cards left unused, heard these words and immediately felt his mentality crumble. Is this just bragging after getting lucky? He shouted in indignation, if you don't want to win, then give me your star. Huh, you have the nerve to say something like that? Your face is even thicker than that scumbag I just met. Komai de Nagito looked at him, startled, and the disdain in his eyes was no longer hidden. I already warned you to change opponents, not to challenge me again. Weren't you the one who thought the probability of me using the same card consecutively was low? I even had some hope for you, thinking maybe you realized this and were just pretending to play along with my bluff. But in the end, you're just worthless trash with no value at all. How disappointing. The person looked utterly incredulous. You mean from the very start you? That earlier statement, I suggest you change opponents, wasn't meant as sarcasm, but was an honest, heartfelt suggestion. From that moment, he had already planned to lose. The man, utterly defeated, left the dueling platform in a daze, while the number of stars on Komai de Nagito's chest reached 5. In the VIP room, Mori Ogai also noticed a shift in Komai de Nagito's attitude. During the first duel, his attitude was still quite normal. Mori Ogai thought to himself, pondering the change. When the opponent lost to him, his attitude didn't change much, but when the opponent insisted on a second duel, his expression became somewhat off. After confirming that the result of the second duel matched his prediction, he completely lost patience with that person, and his attitude became harsh. Was he hoping for something earlier? Is this the mentality of someone who seeks strength? In other words, when he was facing Dazai-kun, he was actually in a more amicable mode at first. That would explain why Dazai-kun could get close to him. After all, Dazai-kun has a big temper, and I don't think he would tolerate much. Based on just that bit of intelligence, Mori Ogai quickly formed a psychological profile of Komai de Nagito, with a fairly high level of accuracy. For Dazai-kun to take an interest, aside from his unique personality, there must be some other reason. Simply being intelligent wouldn't be enough. Unless his intelligence was so high that it rivaled Dazai-kun's own, that wouldn't be the cause. Could it be his luck? The data from Tei Corporation only shows that his luck is terrible, but judging from what just happened, his luck actually seems pretty good. Mori Ogai has always been extremely cautious of Dazai Osamu, as he is the witness to Mori Ogai killing the previous leader of the Port Mafia. Given Mori Ogai's personality, as long as he could control Dazai Osamu, he would actually be quite pleased to keep him within the Port Mafia. However, Dazai's behavior has always been so peculiar. The key issue is that this kid doesn't even seem to care about his own life, making it impossible to predict what he might do next. This gives Mori Ogai a serious headache, as he finds it difficult to fully trust him. So, now that he sees there's an ordinary person who can form some kind of connection with Dazai, Mori Ogai instantly becomes intrigued. Dazai Osamu usually operates in just a few areas, primarily within the Port Mafia for food and lodging. He doesn't have many opportunities to interact with people outside the Mafia, and Mori Ogai doesn't believe that an ordinary person could capture Dazai Osamu's attention. Whether Dazai is pretending to be distant from someone or genuinely so, if Dazai is trying to trick him into thinking this kid is important, Mori Ogai no longer cares about whether it's true or not. He just wants to understand why Komai de Nagito, in particular, has caught Dazai's eye. Because even if Dazai is trying to deceive him and lower his guard, Dazai Osamu wouldn't just pick anyone at random. He's no fool. Whoever was chosen must have something unique enough to convince him. Maybe this Komai de Nagito could even be of use to him. Under Mori Ogai's watchful gaze, many participants, unaware of Komai de Nagito's history due to their lack of shared intelligence, viewed him as easy prey and eagerly challenged him. The result? Komai de Nagito secured an unbroken winning streak, and within less than half an hour, he was left with only one card in hand. At this moment, the Yodo old man spoke up again. He's got one card left. Want to bet again? The conditions are the same as before. Sure, Dazai Osamu quickly responded, let's bet that he'll lose this time. The black-suited Tei Corporation employee, who had been watching the entire time, was utterly confused. This executive candidate of the Port Mafia? Don't you see that Komai de Nagito's luck is seriously strange, that he hasn't lost a single time yet? Are you trying to set up your boss? Or do you just want to cause him trouble? At least pretend to take it seriously, this is way too obvious. The Yodo old man pouted, fine. The black-suited man was astonished to realize that even their own chairman wanted to bet on Komai de Nagito losing. Ah, right. This time, Komai de Nagito only had one card left. As long as someone kept an eye on him, they would know exactly what card he had remaining, making it certain that Komai de Nagito would lose the final round. However, the black-suited man was mistaken. Dazai Osamu had no intention of seriously making this bet in the first place. The only reason Dazai was betting on Komaeda Nagito losing now was because he noticed that the Yodo old man wanted to bet on him losing. So, unless the old man was determined to cheat, there was no way this bet would hold up. Of course, if someone did intend to tamper with the game, Dazai Osamu had other methods to deal with it. However, with only one card left, Komaeda Nagito didn't immediately proceed with the final challenge. Instead, he wandered around. After all, his goal wasn't simply to win the game and successfully leave the ship, that was just the basic procedure. What he truly sought was the reward of finding a person who could bring forth hope in this atmosphere filled with despair. But Komaeda Nagito was disappointed. It was said to be a mood adjustment resting room, so Komaeda Nagito took a look. Inside, the atmosphere was filled with negativity and a sense of impending doom. Even a regular person entering would feel depressed, not to mention that most people in the room already had fragile mindsets. Under immense pressure, being in that space only pushed them further. If they didn't break down into tears, that would be impressive. The people in the resting room could be written off. As for those still fighting in the main hall, Komaeda Nagito walked around once. Forget about finding hope, he couldn't even spot anyone worth paying attention to. One by one, they were either struggling on the verge of collapse, using what he considered lowly methods of deceit and trickery, or simply relying on luck. If relying on luck could lead to success, why did Komaeda Nagito bother coming aboard this ship in search of hope? Wouldn't it have been easier to become hope himself? Thinking about this, Komaeda Nagito began to recall his unfinished plans from his original world, and his mood worsened even further. Originally, he thought he might become a supreme beacon of hope, and he had such eager anticipation for his own death. But in the end, he woke up in a different world, and the outcome of his plan remained unknown. Truly, how unfortunate. When Komaeda Nagito first arrived, he was full of enthusiasm. However, from the moment he kept winning without pause, his emotions gradually plummeted, and now they had hit rock bottom. He believed that hope would be born out of despair, and ordinary levels of despair were never enough. But aside from this ship, where else in this world could such a large amount of despair gather all at once? After going home, he would still need to continue searching for related intelligence. Should he teach himself a bit of coding? See if he could hack into the dark web to find some information. Thinking this way, Komaeda Nagito faced his final challenge. Unexpectedly, this time he lost. Immediately, Komaeda Nagito's previously low spirits lifted with excitement. He actually lost? You have to know he had just swapped cards with another person. If someone had been watching him closely, memorizing every card he played before challenging him, they would have lost. But now, the fact that he was the one who lost meant the challenger had randomly chosen to face him. And his luck chose to make him lose at this moment. Finally, some good news. Komaeda Nagito, who had maintained a blank expression for so long due to disappointment, finally smiled. The person who had just won against him looked bewildered, repeatedly confirming with the referee in black that they had indeed won. So why on earth was Komaeda happy? Could it be that he actually has some kind of mental problem? Unable to figure it out no matter how much they thought about it, the person left in confusion. At this point, Komaeda Nagito had used up all his cards and acquired over 10 stars, successfully completing the game's mission before the time limit, and as a winner, he was granted access to the second-floor winner's lounge to rest. His previously gloomy mood was completely lifted as he joyfully ascended the stairs. What kind of luck awaited him next? Just thinking about it filled Komaeda Nagito with anticipation. The answer was revealed soon enough. Oh, Komaeda-kun. Dressed in formal attire, Dazai Osamu stood at the top of the staircase, with an ill-fitting black suit jacket casually draped over his shoulders, adding a touch of darkness to his appearance. Compared to their last meeting, this time he had a white bandage wrapped around his head, though his energetic demeanor seemed unaffected. He even smiled and gave a small wave to Komaeda Nagito. Long time no see. Chapter 29 End. Chapter 30. Who is more important, me or him? Komaeda Nagito looked at Dazai Osamu, who was waiting there, and revealed an expression of realization. So, this time, the luck was with Dazai-kun? Dazai Osamu pretended to think for a moment, perhaps it's misfortune. Ha ha ha. Komaeda Nagito laughed and said, I feel like it's luck. But for Dazai-kun to appear here like this, is it for work? Maybe there's a chance to see Dazai-kun in work mode. No matter how I think about it, that's luck. Dazai Osamu shrugged, leaned over, and stepped onto the last flight of stairs, with Komaeda Nagito stepping aside to make way for him. They walked side by side. That's right, the boss is here too, but right now it's break time. The old man from Tei Corporation was reviewing Komaeda Nagito's information, but since it wasn't the time for serious discussions, even spending time idly counted as rest. Ha, Boss Mori, pretending to say something like, let the young people go out and have fun, and sent him to find Komaeda Nagito. In reality, he just wanted to observe how they interact with each other. Dazai Osamu knew that Mori Ogai was actually hinting for him to take Komaeda Nagito to their VIP guest room. However, since Mori Ogai didn't explicitly say it, he could take his time, delay a bit on the way, and it wouldn't be an issue. This is the resting room set up for the winner, Dazai Osamu casually introduced to Komaeda Nagito. If you don't want to stay here, you can come with me to the room next door. Komaeda Nagito glanced around at the luxurious resting room. Unlike the room downstairs, which had nothing but a basic sofa and not even a cup of water, this resting room not only had a very comfortable-looking sofa but also a banquet-style long table, filled with various kinds of food and drinks. The people here were also different from the losers downstairs, who could only lick their wounds and avoid facing reality. Every person here was spirited and full of confidence, raising their glasses with glowing faces, complimenting each other on making it this far. The room was filled with an atmosphere of joy. At this moment, while they were chatting with each other, their attention wasn't actually focused on their conversation partners. Instead, they were secretly observing Dazai Osamu and Komaeda Nagito. They saw very clearly that this young man, dressed in a black suit with bandages wrapped around his head, was not one of the typical men in black suits and sunglasses from the Tei Corporation. As individuals from the lower rungs of society, some of them were quite familiar with the underworld, and when this young man first entered the room, the cold, dangerous aura surrounding him was immediately clear to those nearby. In an instant, they understood, he was different from them, and from the people of Tei. He belonged to that other world. The list of accomplishments over the years isn't necessarily reliable when it comes to the mafia. Those who can rise to prominence through cunning and schemes are often far more terrifying than those who steadily climb the ranks step by step. They dared to shout and bark orders at the men in sunglasses, showing off their arrogance, but they couldn't even bring themselves to make eye contact with this young man for more than 3 seconds. At that moment, they became very nervous, not knowing why someone like him had come to their lower-class resting room or what his intentions were. Even though they had all won, there was still a terrifying gulf between them and those important figures. They weren't even in the same league, not even allowed to be in the same room as them. Those important people were in another VIP room, laughing and watching the farce below. This room, which seemed prestigious on the surface, wasn't even worth the attention of those people. However, the sudden silence made things feel even more eerie. But since the newcomers' purpose clearly had nothing to do with them, they could only speak louder, clinking glasses with one another to stir up the atmosphere, trying to prevent the situation from descending into an awkward silence. Fortunately, it wasn't long before the oppressive atmosphere around that mafia-like young man suddenly eased. He opened his mouth and called out a name, and his tone even sounded rather cheerful. Everyone quietly memorized the pronunciation of that surname, deciding that in the future, they would stay far away from people like him. The person who approached was a young man with fluffy, loose white hair. Coming up from that kind of place indicated that this young man named Komaeda, like them, was a participant in the game downstairs. However, no one here truly felt that they were the same. Because this young man named Komaeda had a badge on his chest displaying over a dozen stars, a simple tally that practically made it seem like he hadn't lost at all. Even those who had been through this multiple times had never seen such a terrifying record. What could that mean? This meant that either this young man Komaeda was incredibly skilled at manipulating people's minds, or his luck was absolutely unbeatable. As for cheating, some people, having participated in the game several times, had thoroughly figured out its rules, but there weren't many ways to cheat. Unless you bribed the referees, no amount of cheating could win you that many stars. So, it had to be one of the first two possibilities. And whichever one it was, both were the kind of traits that gamblers both revere and fear. The gamblers exchanged glances, trying to communicate their thoughts. What's the relationship between those two? He's dressed so extravagantly, why would he come to a place like this? Did he bribe the referees? It doesn't seem like he recognizes anyone here, so maybe he didn't cheat. The surname Komaeda sounds familiar, why can't I remember where it's from? In truth, exchanging glances was quite difficult, they were all speaking past each other. They just saw that others were smiling and playing along, so the atmosphere fell into place. Whether or not they correctly understood each other's looks was a different matter. They quietly listened to these two youths, much younger than them, whose circumstances were entirely different, talking to each other. They initially thought it had nothing to do with them, but as the conversation went on, the two's gazes suddenly fell on them. Everyone's expressions became somewhat stiff, yet they tried to maintain an air of indifference. Life was indeed tough. Their little thoughts were almost transparent in Komaeda Nagito's eyes. As a result, Komaeda Nagito, now disinterested, shifted his gaze away. No. If the ones downstairs are the trash among trash, then they are just slightly better recycled garbage. Komaeda Nagito said in a harsh tone. In the end, it's just about clearing debts. They are still at the very bottom of society. Rising again to create a new life requires willpower and action, and from this crowd, I don't see even the slightest trace of that. They are clearly just trash, yet they get conceited because they've beaten worse trash. They think that now they're somehow different from the garbage they once were, completely overestimating themselves. With those words, the room, which had been filled with joyful chatter, instantly fell into a frozen silence. Only Dazai-Osamu wasn't bothered by the harshness of the words. In fact, he even clapped for Komaeda Nagito. Well said. Though, Komaeda-kun, I didn't expect you to have such a sharp tongue, what a rare sight. A sharp tongue. Komaeda Nagito's attitude softened considerably as he turned to talk to Dazai-Osamu. I was just speaking the truth. Besides, Dazai-kun is so amazing, completely different from this trash. How could I possibly use that kind of attitude toward you? Well, I'm truly honored then, Dazai-Osamu smiled. If you're not interested in the people here, come with me inside. With that, Dazai-Osamu led Komaeda Nagito out of the room, leaving behind a silent resting lounge. The man from Tei Corporation, responsible for maintaining order, looked at the crowd who no longer seemed to be in a celebratory mood and sympathetically adjusted his sunglasses. Suddenly, someone spoke up, wait. I think I remember where I've heard the name Komaeda before. I think I remember too. Another person asked with a strange expression, just to confirm, did you used to work in insurance? Yes. The two former insurance workers exchanged glances, both showing expressions of recognition and unease. The others, hearing this cryptic yet seemingly significant conversation, grew curious and couldn't help but ask what was going on. The atmosphere quickly became lively again. Let me start from the beginning. Do you know that Tei Corporation has an insurance company? Over there, they've got a real troublemaker whose last name is pronounced Komaeda. Komaeda Nagito and Dazai-Osamu had no idea that after they left, the people who had just been rendered expressionless by their words immediately perked up and started gossiping. If they had known, they likely would have only thought that this group was even more hopeless. In reality, these people didn't even leave any impression in their minds. After exiting the door of this resting room, they found themselves in a hallway. As they walked, Dazai-Osamu tilted his head slightly, looking toward Komaeda Nagito, and asked, "By the way, Komaeda-kun, did you come here through some sort of deal with the people from Tei Corporation? What made you think of coming to a place like this?" Komaeda Nagito smiled naturally and replied, "I'm searching for hope." "Hope? In a place like this?" Dazai-Osamu raised an eyebrow. "That's right. I just thought that in a place filled with despair, there might be a chance for a brilliant hope to be born. But this place is not what I imagined." Komaeda Nagito sighed. This level of despair is nowhere near enough to become the fertile ground for hope. Trash is still trash, and garbage is still garbage. I want to see something deeper, a more intense and overwhelming despair, not this trivial, petty chaos. Dazai-Osamu thought to himself, considering that Komaeda Nagito, who had witnessed his parents being crushed to death by a meteorite right in front of him, likely had expectations for grander circumstances. Satisfying his desire for such an experience through Tei Corporation alone might indeed be a bit difficult. "Komaeda-kun, why are you so obsessed with seeing hope?" Dazai-Osamu already had a vague idea of the answer in his mind, but seeing Komaeda Nagito in this state, he felt it necessary to confirm. "Why?" Komaeda Nagito looked at Dazai-Osamu with confusion. "Isn't pursuing hope the most natural thing?" "That's not necessarily the case." Dazai-Osamu smiled and said, "In the end, hope is just like ideals, nothing more than a vague concept. When people say they are pursuing an ideal, they aren't chasing some abstract word, but rather something that represents that ideal. For example, my ideal is to revive my family, or my ideal is to become president." As he spoke, Dazai-Osamu watched Komaeda Nagito closely, trying to catch any small change in his expression. "So, Komaeda-kun, when you talk about pursuing hope, what specific thing does that hope represent?" Dazai-Osamu wasn't surprised by Komaeda Nagito's silence. He had once used an eavesdropping devices on Kudo Shinichi and listened in on Komaeda Nagito's definition of hope. No matter how many times despair devours it, it will not disappear, it's unchangeable, it's an absolute good thing. But this was still just a concept, not something tangible. What Dazai-Osamu wanted to know now was whether Komaeda Nagito himself understood the true reason behind his pursuit of hope. Komaeda Nagito took a while to respond, and his once clear gaze gradually became more muddled. "It's just that, even if you don't put it into specific words, doesn't everyone already know? All kinds of messages have always taught us, full of hope, so, something that won't change even when struck by despair is worth pursuing, right?" No one had ever asked Komaeda Nagito this question before. In his previous world, hope was an unspoken and universally understood concept. Children are hope, talented individuals are the world's hope. These kinds of messages constantly appeared. Growing up in such an environment, Komaeda Nagito naturally accepted this logic. Hope was an absolute good thing, and no one would question or pursue the specifics behind it. In this kind of environment, where there was a fanatical reverence for hope, Komaeda Nagito lost the ability to clearly distinguish between what part of his belief was his own will and what part was shaped by the environment. When had he started chasing hope, wanting to witness hope with his own eyes? Why had he become so obsessed with hope? Komaeda Nagito no longer remember. Dazai-Osamu observed Komaeda Nagito's expression and seemed to come to a realization. He interrupted the topic, "If you can't figure it out, don't force yourself to. Sometimes, the more you try to recall, the further you get away from the answer. Dazai-kun, you're actually willing to have such a deep conversation with me. You're so kind," Komaeda Nagito couldn't help but remark. Dazai-Osamu. Even Dazai-Osamu sometimes couldn't quite grasp Komaeda Nagito's train of thought. At the very least, he didn't think that his earlier intense questioning had anything to do with being kind. Yet, Komaeda Nagito's fondness for Dazai-Osamu had now grown even stronger. From their previous conversation, Komaeda Nagito clearly understood that Dazai Osamu had no interest in hope. But that wasn't Dazai-kun's fault. Komaeda Nagito thought to himself. It's because, as Dazai-kun said, people aren't interested in vague, abstract concepts. They have too many things demanding their attention, more concrete, tangible goals they can pursue, which, in itself, is actually a manifestation of being filled with hope. However, in his previous world, whenever others faced his explanations and discussions about hope, they only showed expressions of disgust, telling him to stop talking about strange things. But Dazai-kun was different. Dazai-kun seriously listened, clearly gave it thought, and even proactively expressed the parts he didn't understand. To Komaeda, this was a rare kind of feedback. It was only just now that Komaeda Nagito realized where the problem had been all along with his preaching, and he resolved to make improvements. If the reason was that his abstract concepts were too vague to resonate with others, he could compensate by using more concrete examples. So, if he could recall the initial reason for his longing for hope, he should be able to make his arguments more convincing and avoid getting stuck when someone like Dazai-kun asks a question. However, what Dazai-kun said makes sense. For something so distant, forcing yourself to think about it might only make it harder to recall. It's better to slowly remember it later, just keeping it in mind for now. Dazai Osamu had no idea that, unintentionally, he had increased Komaeda Nagito's fondness for him. He was simply guiding him, like a tour guide, introducing things to Komaeda Nagito. This here is the banquet hall. Komaeda Nagito then asked, is Dazai-kun's boss here? No, we need to take a different route for that. This area is for the guests invited by the president of Tei Corporation, Dazai Osamu explained matter-of-factly. It's rare to have some time to relax, so I don't want to return too quickly. Taking the long way around is a good way to unwind. A man in black sunglasses, looking as if he had been mass-produced by Tei Corporation, respectfully opened the door for them. Immediately, the lively sound of people chatting came through. If one ignored the performances happening in the hall below, which showcased the acting of the people from the lower rungs of society, this place suddenly appeared to be nothing more than a typical high-class gathering. Inside the fragrant atmosphere of elegance, everyone was dressed in luxurious and extravagant formal attire, exuding endless grace as they moved through the crowd. Holding their glasses of wine was not necessarily for drinking, even though the wine inside was worth a month's effort of an ordinary worker's salary, yet they did not care at all. It seemed as though it was merely an ornament, a prop to start a conversation. As soon as the door opened, a certain someone who was doing secret work, extremely sensitive to changes in their surroundings, instinctively glanced towards the door. After that, he froze in place without saying a word, and for a moment, he couldn't find the words to describe his feelings. In front of Komaeda Nagito, he appeared to possess two identities, a folklorist and a detective. Under the alias Amuro Toru, a member of the Japanese police, he silently screamed in his heart. Komaeda-kun, why are you here? Perhaps due to being sensitive to gazes, Port Mafia's executive candidate Dazai Osamu was the first to notice Amuro Toru's gaze. After glancing directly at him, Dazai Osamu smiled and said something to Komaeda Nagito, who was standing beside him. Amuro Toru thought to himself, this isn't good. The main purpose of his visit to this place was a certain important figure at this banquet. Carrying out the mission quietly was his original intention. If those two approached him, he felt things would become a bit troublesome. The more Amuro Toru hoped something not to happen, the more likely that something will happen. Sure enough, in the next moment, hearing what Dazai Osamu told him, Komaeda Nagito immediately began smiling and waving toward Amuro Toru. Amuro Toru sighed deeply in his heart. Don't be fooled by the fact that he had been at this banquet hall for quite some time. In truth, he barely paid attention to anything going on. As a member of the police, he had absolutely no interest in this kind of game that exposes the dark side of human nature, and even found it disgusting. Whenever he saw it, his mind would be filled with thoughts of how Tei Corporation was pulling such underhanded tricks, yet due to the entanglement of various forces, they couldn't be apprehended directly. Then, he'd only end up getting frustrated with himself, so it was better to just turn a blind eye. However, the banquet hall's broadcast screen and the rooms for distinguished guests were different, and Komaeda Nagito didn't appear much on the main screen. Amuro Toru wasn't paying attention to the lower floor, focused on his mission, so he naturally didn't expect this current situation to occur. In the banquet's grand hall, the upper-class individuals were all dressed formally, and suddenly a casually dressed Komaeda Nagito appeared, along with a slightly dangerous-looking Dazai Osamu, standing out quite a bit. However, everyone present had seen major events in life, held power in their hands, and thus did not panic. They weren't as nervous as those previous game winners, and though they found it strange, they took a glance and then ignored it. Furthermore, due to their level of refinement, they wouldn't keep staring incessantly. Because of this, Komaeda Nagito and Dazai Osamu moved through the crowd in the calm atmosphere and arrived at Amuro Toru's corner. Komaeda-kun, Amuro Toru greeted him with a complex expression, and this person. Dazai Osamu said. You're the Amuro who brought the cat-transformed Komaeda-kun over, right? We've already chatted over the phone. Amuro Toru wasn't surprised that he had been recognized. Perhaps he had been monitoring the Port Mafia's headquarters cameras, or maybe it was just a random guess, or perhaps there were simply too many possibilities. If he went to the Port Mafia's headquarters, he never intended to fully conceal his tracks. Therefore, he had already released some specific intelligence to deal with other people's investigations. It's me. I didn't expect to see you here, Dazai-kun. Amuro Toru pretended to be unaware of the intelligence talks between the Port Mafia and the Tei Corporation taking place on this ship, putting on a look of surprise. Did you bring Komaeda-kun here to have some fun? Dazai Osamu immediately perked up. Not at all. I'm just as surprised to see Komaeda-kun here. If Komaeda-kun wanted, how could I not help him if he just told me? Komaeda Nagito smiled awkwardly and said, how could I shamelessly bother Dazai-kun? Besides, I didn't even know Dazai-kun would be here. But actually, Amuro-san. Amuro Toru saw the expression on Komaeda Nagito's face, full of, you're the one who's really out of place here, and couldn't help but cough lightly. He quickly brought up the excuse he had prepared in advance. Well, I'm a detective, aren't I? I came here because there's something I want to investigate. This excuse was something Komaeda Nagito could accept, but it wouldn't fool Dazai Osamu. At least after Amuro Toru finished speaking, he glanced at that young man who could one day become the future crime boss of Yokohama, Dazai Osamu, a prospective executive candidate of the Port Mafia, and noticed that the other was looking at him with an expression of clear understanding. Dazai Osamu smiled faintly and said, to be able to get an invitation to this ship, Detective San really has extraordinary abilities. There was clearly an underlying meaning to his words, but Komaeda Nagito ignored the hidden implications, directly agreeing, yes, I also think Amuro-san is very talented, whether in folklore studies, detective work, or in other areas. I hope Amuro-san can continue to excel in his areas of expertise. This guy. Amuro Toru couldn't help but glance at Komaeda Nagito and helplessly realized that with his many suspicious behavior, Komaeda Nagito probably had noticed it before but simply didn't care, as long as the parts he was interested in seemed fine. This kind of personality is really dangerous, especially when he's mingling with the mafia. Unfortunately, he wasn't in a position to say anything, as Komaeda Nagito wasn't someone close to him. He could only hope the kid knew what he was doing and wouldn't stray down the wrong path. Amuro Toru took a deep breath, still maintaining a smile, and found the most convenient way to deal with Komaeda Nagito. If I may ask, Komaeda-kun, could you help me with something right now? My mission requires me to keep a low profile. Komaeda Nagito immediately understood, though it's a pity I won't get to see Amuro-san at work, I'll take my leave then. True to his word, Komaeda Nagito promptly turned around, ready to leave, but as soon as he took a step, he realized Dazai Osamu was still standing in place, looking at Amuro Toru. Dazai-kun? He tugged lightly on Dazai-Osamu's coat sleeve, reminding him, "We shouldn't disturb Amuro-san's work right now, should we? If it's not something particularly important, we can talk about it later." Dazai-Osamu's expression became somewhat subtle, but he didn't say anything, and simply followed Komaeda Nagito as they left. As if being divinely assisted, Amuro Toru raised an eyebrow, and his previously heavy mood finally lightened considerably, even making him smile naturally. After passing through the banquet hall and exiting through another door into the hallway, Dazai-Osamu couldn't hold back any longer and spoke. "Let me ask something. Although I really hate to admit it, that guy Chuya fits your standard of a talented person, doesn't he?" "Nakahara-san. Of course." Komaeda Nagito answered without hesitation. Dazai-Osamu pondered for a moment. "So, if there were something important that required choosing a capable person, and the final vote was in your hands, would you choose me or Chuya?" Komaeda Nagito immediately responded, "How could someone as ordinary and incompetent as me be qualified to judge between two such great people like you? Of course, I'd decline to vote." Dazai-Osamu. There was no need to say anything further. Even though the reason sounded reasonable, what he wanted to know had already been confirmed. Komaeda Nagito's attitude toward Amuro Toru earlier gave him a subtle feeling, and now after testing it a bit. Clearly, they had only met once, and Chuya even openly say in front of Komaeda about whether or not to kill him. Yet despite such suffocating behavior from Chuya, in Komaeda Nagito's mind, their importance is somehow on the same level. They've only met once. He couldn't swallow this indignation. Chapter 30 End.